All right, buckle up, everybody, because today's deep dive is going deep, like way down into the microscopic world of our brains. We're talking microglia, stress, and what it all means for those oh so important telomeres we hear so much about, those protective caps on our DNA that everyone's always saying are the key to aging well.
And we've got some seriously cool research to unpack, too.
We do, sent in by you, our amazing listener.
Always the best.
So, want to set the stage for us?
Absolutely. We're about to explore how different kinds of stress, I'm talking everything from like a sudden health scare to just the daily grind of life, can actually change those microglia at the genetic level, which is kind of wild when you think about it.
It is, and I think a little refresher might be helpful for anyone who hasn't been down the neuroscience rabbit hole lately. So, microglia, they're basically like the cleanup crew of our brains, right?
Perfect analogy. Microglia are constantly on patrol, like tiny little guardians, making sure your brain stays in tip-top shape. They clean up debris, fight off anything suspicious.
Keep things tidy.
Exactly. And what's fascinating is that this study shows how different stressful situations can actually change which genes in the microglia get activated, particularly those related to our friend the telomere.
Which has huge implications if you think about it. It's like we've always sort of known that stress ages us, but now we're seeing the actual mechanisms at play down to tiny changes in these microscopic cells.
Exactly. And the researchers were clever about it, too. Yeah. They specifically looked at what happened when they triggered different types of microglia activation. They mimicked what happens in the brain during a stroke, what happens with Alzheimer's-like damage, and even what happens under chronic everyday stress.
Okay, so walk us through what they found. Different situations, different types of microglia activation. What did that mean for our telomeres?
All right, so here's where things get really interesting. When they triggered what's called classical, or M1 activation, in the microglia, that's the kind you see in response to an injury or a major health challenge, the results were pretty striking.
Let me guess. Not good for our telomeres.
You got it. Both in the lab-grown microglia and in samples from mice who'd experienced a stroke, this M1 activation essentially told the genes responsible for telomere maintenance to hit the brakes.
So it's like when your brain's in that full-on fight-or-flight mode, the microglia are so busy dealing with the immediate crisis that they take their eyes off the long game, which in this case is preserving those telomeres so we can age well.
That's a great way to put it. It's like they shift all their resources to damage control, and long-term maintenance gets put on hold.
Fascinating. And did they see this across the board?
They specifically saw this with a gene called Tert, which is like the superstar of telomere health. It's essential for keeping them long and strong. The suppression was super obvious in the stroke model, and while it was less dramatic in the model mimicking Alzheimer's, it was still definitely there.
Wow. Okay, so what about the chronic stress model? That kind of low-grade, always-on stress that so many of us are dealing with these days. Did that have the same impact?
That's the million-dollar question, right?
Yeah.
And that's where the findings get a bit more, shall we say, nuanced.
So spill the tea. What's the deal with chronic stress? Is it shrinking our telomeres too?
Well, it definitely left its mark on the microglia, that's for sure.
Yeah.
But it took a slightly more roundabout way. Instead of directly going after those telomere-related genes like we saw with the M1 activation, chronic stress seemed to kind of mess with the microglia's own internal support system.
Interesting. So stress made it harder for them to do their jobs. Is that what you're saying?
Kind of, yeah. Specifically, it messed with something called the PGC network.
The PGC network, that sounds like, I don't know, some kind of super secret government agency. What is it?
Right, it stands for Peroxisome Proliferator Activated Receptor Coactivator.
Catchy.
Yeah, you try saying that 3 times fast. But let's just call it the microglia's own personal wellness program. Basically, this network controls all the important stuff, how they produce energy, how they clear out waste, how they stay in fighting shape to protect your brain, all that good stuff.
Okay, so chronic stress messes with their wellness program. Got it. But what does that actually look like? Give us the nuts and bolts.
Okay, so in the mice they exposed to chronic stress, the researchers saw a really notable dip in the activity of this one gene called NFE2L2. And it just so happens that NFE2L2 is a major player in that PGC network we were just talking about.
NFE2L2. Definitely not rolling off the tongue, that one. What's so special about it?
Okay, so imagine NFE2L2 is like the microglia's first line of defense against something called oxidative stress.
Oxidative stress. Now, there's a term I have heard thrown around, usually by people trying to sell me expensive skincare.
Well, they're not wrong. You know how free radicals get blamed for everything from like wrinkles to cancer?
Who hasn't heard that one?
Right. So oxidative stress is basically what happens when those little troublemakers, those free radicals, they run rampant in your cells.
Yeah.
And it's bad news.
Got it. So chronic stress basically weakens the microglia's defenses against this whole oxidative stress situation. That can't be good, but is it directly causing my telomeres to like shrivel up in fear?
Okay, so that's the million-dollar question, right? This study draws a pretty clear line between certain types of microglia, those M1s we talked about going a little haywire, and then the genes responsible for telomere maintenance getting suppressed. But this whole chronic stress and NFE2L2 thing, that connection is a little more, I'd say, it's a little more like a dotted line at this point. We're not quite sure yet.
Okay, so we're seeing a possible link, a breadcrumb trail, but we need more research to know for sure if chronic stress is actually messing with our telomeres in the long run.
Exactly. It's like we've stumbled onto this like hidden room in this massive mansion. We know something fascinating is going on in there, but we need to, we need to poke around a bit more to really figure out what it all means.
Intriguing. So where does this leave us besides wanting to like immediately meditate for an hour and maybe like invest in some high-powered antioxidants?
Well, listen, I'm all for a little self-care, especially after reading about all this, but I think the big takeaway here, the thing we really need to be paying attention to, is the importance of taking a more, holistic perspective when it comes to our health. We tend to compartmentalize, right? It's like,
Yeah.
there's my physical health, there's my mental health, two totally separate things. But this research, this really just shows you how interconnected those two things truly are, even at the smallest level.
Yeah, it really makes you think differently about stress, you know? It's not as like, ugh, I'm so stressed. It's like, oh, wait a minute, this is actually messing with my brain on a microscopic level.
No, seriously, it's not just in your head. It's like literally in your head. And the thing is, it's not even just like those big, dramatic, life-altering events that can do this. It's that everyday stuff, the chronic, low-grade stress that's always simmering in the background. That's the stuff that might actually be nudging these processes along in a way that could have real consequences down the road.
It's like that whole straw that breaks the camel's back thing, but like on a cellular level.
I love that. That's a really good way to put it.
Yeah.
It's not just one thing. It's the accumulation, the buildup over time. That's what seems to really matter.
So, okay, here we are, knowing all this. What's the takeaway? Should we all be like running out to buy noise-canceling headphones and, I don't know, booking a meditation retreat?
Listen, I am always down for a little self-care, but I think the real message here, if we're really going to boil it down, is this. We need to start thinking about our health in a more holistic way because we tend to separate things out. Like, here's my physical health, over here's my mental health. Like, they're two completely different things. But what this research shows us is how artificial that separation really is. They're interconnected,
Yeah.
even down at the smallest level.
It's like that old saying, healthy body, healthy mind. But now we're actually starting to see the nuts and bolts, the biological mechanisms that actually connect the two.
Exactly. And while we always need more research, of course, this study gives us a really exciting, really tantalizing glimpse into how taking care of ourselves, whether it's through stress management, exercise, diet, you name it, it might not just be good for our mood in the moment or, how our genes fit. It might actually be protecting our brains at the cellular level.
Okay, so maybe those meditation apps and green smoothies aren't so woo-woo after all.
Maybe not. And this is just one study focusing on just a few specific kinds of stress and a handful of genes. Imagine what we might find as we dig deeper into this whole world, this connection between microglia, our genes, and brain health in general. That's a whole new frontier.
It's like we're just starting to understand how much power we really have over our own brain health. It definitely makes you think twice about that extra cup of coffee when you're already running on fumes, right? So if our listeners could take away just one, mind-blowing thing from this whole deep dive, what would you want it to be?
I think it would be this. We are just scratching the surface of understanding how our brains respond to the world around us. That's the mind-blowing part. But with every new discovery, with every study like this one, we are getting closer to being able to protect and maybe even enhance our cognitive health in ways that, honestly, we never thought possible. And that is incredibly exciting.
It's like we hold the keys to unlocking a whole new level of brain power. Well, on that note, huge thanks to you for taking us there today. It's always fascinating to chat with you.
Oh, the pleasure is all mine, believe me. I love getting to geek out about this stuff.
And for everyone listening, thanks for joining us on this incredible deep dive. We hope it's left you feeling, well, informed, of course, but also a little bit inspired, maybe even empowered to really prioritize your own amazing brain. Until next time.